Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining RJ Julia Booksellers virtual event tonight with Jake Halpern. A few Zoom housekeeping details before we get started. You are muted and you will remain muted throughout the duration of this event. For optimal viewing, use Zoom view functions in the top right corner of your screen. Select speaker view so our author is highlighted on your screen. Please Sorry, it seems I got muted there. Please ask questions in the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat and get to as many questions as possible. If at any time you drop off the Zoom or experience technical difficulties, simply click the link again to be readmitted. Please don't forget to purchase a copy of Welcome to the New World at rjjulia.com. That link will also be sent in the chat shortly. And without further ado, I'm going to pass things off to Karen to get things started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. We are so excited. Anytime we get to work with the country school, it is just really a privilege for us. And I just want to thank you guys for allowing us to be a part of this. And I get the fun opportunity of introducing Beth Coyne, because she works really closely with us and always gives us opportunities. So it's really an honor for me to kind of turn everything over to Beth and let her take it over. So Beth, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Jake, everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Karen, so much. I love our relationship with all of you and at RJ's, and I'm so pleased to welcome an old friend, Jake Halpern, back. I'm going to let the kids introduce him, but we go way back with Jake as well at the country school. I am the assistant head of school at the country school, and one of the things that we have done with RJ Julia's over the years is to partner with them to initiate a parenting series. So over the years, we'll bring in authors or people to talk about lots of different important topics to the Shoreline community. And this year, our word of the year at school is empathy. And we feel it's a very important skill to have and to talk about and to use with our students, with the adults in our community, teachers and students alike, parents. It allows people to build social connections with others and to really understand, we're always talking about, can you put yourself in someone else's shoes? We love using it through literature, and when our students are working in the English classroom or the history classroom or any classroom, they're constantly trying to talk about empathy and imagining what the character must be going through. So tonight we're in for a treat because we get to meet the character of Jake's recent book and to learn and to use empathy to help understand kind of greater connections with people. So I am going to turn things over to our idea committee. They're going to tell you what that means. These are some students from the country school. And Megan, I think you're the first one. So thank you so much, Karen and all.
Hi, everyone. We are all members of the Country Schools Idea Student Alliance. IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Empathy, and Action, which are all themes we see in Welcome to the New World, the Pulitzer Prize winning book we will hear about tonight.
We are thrilled to welcome the book's author, Jake Halpern, to join us to speak about the process of writing this book, as well as the process of getting to know our other guest, Naji and his family. Naji, one of the book's main subjects, came to the United States 4 years ago as a young teen after having to leave his home in Syria because of the civil war.
We have been lucky enough to hear from Mr. Halpern in the past when he visited our school to talk about some of his previous books. In addition to Welcome to the New World, he is also the author of Dormia, Edgeland, and Nightfall for young adults and several other books for adults. As a journalist, he has written the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker, the Atlantic Monthly, the Wall Street Journal, Sports Illustrated, and more.
Naji, now a high school student, has lived in Connecticut with his parents and siblings since they arrived on election night in 2016. We are so grateful to hear both of our guests tonight, and we'd like to thank them for joining us to share their story.
Thank you too to RJ Julia Booksellers for continuing to partner with the country school so we can hear from authors and about issues that matter to all of us. With that, we hand the microphone over to Jake Halpern and Naji Alpadon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you to the country school and to Beth for making this happen on her end, and also to RJ Julia. You guys are a tremendous bookstore, and I know I speak for so many authors here when I say that we really appreciate your support. I have been to your school many times over the years. This is my first virtual visit, but in a way, it's going to be a really special one because it's very rare that you can actually have a book where the main character is with you there to answer all the questions. And I'm just so excited that Naji is here with us today too. So you're going to hear Naji's story in his own words, but first I just want to kind of explain to you how this story came onto my radar in the first place. So I had an idea about doing a true comic that would tell the story of some refugees that arrived in America. And so when I do that, when I come up with an idea, the most important thing is finding the person, the right person who wants to tell their story, who has a good story. And so I thought, how am I going to find I don't really know that many refugees. How am I going to do this? So I called up a place called Iris, which is a refugee resettlement agency here in Connecticut. And I knew the guy that ran it. His name was Chris George. And I said, hey, Chris, I have this idea for doing this true comic. Can you help me find a refugee family that's here in the United States? Because the New York Times is interested in running this comic every week or every other week. And Chris said, you know what, Jake, I got an even better idea. Why don't you plan to be there on the day that a new family arrives? You can actually see them step off the bus after they get off the plane. And I said, yeah, that's a cool idea. But Chris, what happens if I'm there and they get off the bus and then they say, no, thank you, we don't want to be part of a New York Times comic? He said, well, you'll have to circle back with the family and see if they want to do it. But why don't we give it a go? And we'll, if not this family, then the next one. They said, great. My editors of the New York Times liked it. And Chris called me up and said, hey, we have a family that's arriving on election day. This is 2016, almost 4 years ago exactly. They're called the Aldebans, and they have two brothers, and they're each here with their wife and kids. And what do you say? I said, oh, that sounds great. That's kind of cool. Election day, I'll show up. So on election day, 2016, me and my illustrator, because I worked with an illustrator who did the drawings, Michael Sloan, we show up in downtown New Haven and we're waiting for them to arrive, for the Aldebans to arrive. And this little minivan comes in, two of them actually. And I see for the first time Naji across this darkened parking lot. He was 4 years younger. He was a lot skinnier. Naji's hit the gym now, so he's a big dude. And I kind of wave at them. And I say, look, I'll call you in like a week or two when I get back and we can start and you'll hear from me, So I go home that night and I check the news to see how the election is going. Now, all the people that had predicted or projected said that Hillary Clinton was going to win this election. But by 2 a.m, when I checked my computer, it showed that Donald Trump had become president. And my first thought was, wow, this family has basically landed in one country and is going to wake up tomorrow morning in another country, because the Trump administration, whether you liked it or didn't like it, the fact was they had a very different position on whether refugees should continue to come to the United States. And as it turns out, Naji's family, his grandmothers and aunt and uncles, they were all still back in Jordan. So the fact that there was a new administration, that had real meaning for this family, because it meant that maybe the grandma and the cousins and everyone that was still over there was not going to be able to come and join them. And I thought to myself, wow, this is really powerful. I hope this family agrees. So I called up a guy that I knew who was a Syrian American. He was an architect. And I said, would you go with me to the family and give me an introduction and be my translator? And he said, Jake, I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's a bit of a long shot. You don't speak Arabic. You're not from Syria. You're not a Muslim guy. He says, I'm all those things. And sometimes it's taken me years to win the trust of refugee families that have come in. I think it's a cool idea, but I want to be honest with you. I don't know or think it's going to work. And I said to him, well, can we give it a try? Let's try it. So he said, okay. And I went and then I visited both brothers, and I'll never forget, I went to visit, when I visited Naji, he was in Manchester, Connecticut. He didn't speak hardly any English. I sat down next to him on the couch, and there was a teapot. I don't know if any of you have had the pleasure of going to visit a Syrian family, but they have amazing hospitality. And Naji was this 15-year-old boy, and every time my teacup got down to like 2 inches from full, he was right there filling it back up, smiling at me. And I thought, wow, this kid, he seems really great. I wish I could talk to him, because I did want the parent's story, but to be honest, I was really especially interested in the kid's story. What's it like to be a kid and come to a new country? And so luckily, the mom and dad, Ibrahim and Adiba, were lovely. And they said, Jake, we'll be happy to participate in this. And I started visiting the family every week. And when I would visit them and see what was happening, what was going on with them, I would then write up a story that my artist would turn into a comic, and it would appear every week or every other week in the New York Times. And slowly the whole country started following this family. Well, one day I see something kind of interesting with Naji. I see that when all the other kids are gathered in the other room getting their English lessons, Naji always is with his mom and dad trying to understand what decisions they're making. And sometimes even one of the co-sponsors who helped with the family, he would say, Naji, why don't you go over there and be with the kids? And I said to him, Naji, what's the deal? Why don't you sit with your brothers and sisters? And I'll never forget this. He looked me in the eye and he said, Jake, I don't go with the other kids because I stopped being a kid when I was 10. And I thought, you stop being a kid when you're 10? Well, what does that mean? What did this kid go through? What did he see? And I couldn't really ask him right up at the time. And for two reasons. One reason was I sensed that there was something very heavy and very dark and difficult that Naji was referring to. And I didn't feel that I could just say, tell me all about it. I had to build up a little bit of that trust with him and his family. And also, quite honestly, at that time, Naji's English still wasn't at the level where he could just tell me the whole story. But I remembered that moment. And I came again and again for months, and then a year, and then 2 years. I ended up spending 4 years following this family. And over that time, I slowly got to know Naji, and I got to hear his story. And so what we're going to do now is you're going to kind of see how I heard it, because I'm just going to ask Naji some of the questions that I asked him when I first started talking to him. And the first thing that I want to start with is that before the civil war happened in Syria, Naji had a pretty good life. Naji, can you remember and can you tell us a little bit about what was your life like before the civil war came? What was it like? It seemed like it was pretty good.
Hi everyone. My name is Naji, and when we were living before the war, it was great. We were living just like any other family that we saw through our journey. I actually had friends. We went to school. My dad had a phone store, and we had our own house. It was great. Suddenly, all that had to change. The war has started, and on that day where I told Jake that I stopped being a kid, I was 10 years old, and we were in the house. We were all my family together. We had a breakfast, and then people start protesting. After people protested, fights happened. It got even worse. There's shooting started to happen. And suddenly one day, the military came to our house and they knocked on the door, and then they asked my dad, they would like to ask him a couple of questions. He went with them, and it took 40 days until I saw my dad again.
Naji, can we slow down for just 1 second here? Because I want to just two things. So when they take your dad that first night, what's going through your head? Because you're 10 years old. Some of the kids maybe even watching are around that age. What's going through your head that first night when dad is not in the house?
It was a nightmare. It's a feeling that you can't explain until you actually go through it. I mean, on that time, that's when you needed someone to help you, someone to save you. And suddenly that person just left and you're there by yourself. that's how I felt, and it was very scary. It, something that, it's kind of hard to explain, but it was very difficult because the thing that you were trying to protect yourself with and saying, oh, it's all good, my dad's here, he will protect us, he's suddenly gone.
And your mom, I remember she gave you some advice, which she said, in case the soldiers came back, that what you should do. What did she tell you? Can you tell us?
She actually told me that if they come back, try to pretend that you're asleep and like make yourself look shorter. Because if you look big, they will think that you're an adult. And back then, even they took 16, 15, 14 years old into the prison.
So your dad has been taken. You're there with your mom, and at that point, it's your two younger sisters, right?
Yeah.
And what's going on outside in the streets?
Outside shooting, we would look from the balcony very carefully. You find militaries, tanks. Tanks was right in front of our house. Every time it shoots, like the whole building, you feel like it's gonna break. You see dead bodies in the streets, and all what I've seen is when my dad was taken, and then all the war really started, because when he was there, that was just the beginning.
So your dad gets taken, your mom is with you, you're 10 years old, your two sisters are younger, and she eventually makes the decision that you should go to your grandmother's house, who you call Yuma, because the rest of the family is gathered there and you'll be at least together. And you get there to your grandmother's house, and it's a tough situation because your uncles have also been taken. And your grandmother at that point pulls you aside and has a conversation with you. And can you tell us what your grandmother says to you?
So my grandmother called me up and took me into the side. She said, Naji, you have to listen. You're the only man, you and your cousin are the only men in the house, and you have to be responsible for the rest of the family. You have to protect them. And at that time, I was in a situation where I lost my dad, who actually protects me, and I was very scared. And I suddenly had to be the one who protects the rest of the family. And that, to me, that meant, like, if the military comes into our house and they want to take, my mom or my grandma or or to hurt anyone else, I have to be the one who stops them. And what I was actually thinking about is trying to fight them with a knife, with anything that I can stop them. That was what's going on in my head at 10 years old.
Wow. Your grandmother also says that there's things the family needs to kind of get by, and she wants you to help with that. Can you tell us what she has you do?
She had me, me and my cousin, we went outside and we collected copper. So when we would collect the copper and go sell it to make some money to buy food for the family, that was one of the most challenging times I've ever, I am thankful that I'm still alive, because many situations we would almost get shot. Every time we would walk in the street, we'd find bodies literally without heads on the ground, and all that we were watching at 10 years old. It was very frightening.
How did you do it, Naji? I mean, how do you manage to hold it together and not, kind of lose it in that situation?
I think it depends on the person, and it depends on the situation. You just have to not even think about it. You have to hold yourself thinking like it's not even happening, because that's the only way you can, walk next to dead bodies and keep walking.
So you managed to get through this period of time, and eventually your mother gets a call from your dad, and he tells her, I'm alive, I'm okay, I'm in prison, and which comes as a relief to the family. And then your mom embarks on this amazing campaign where she goes to the courthouse and manages to get the paperwork necessary to get your father released from prison. One night late, she goes with your grandmother and they pick up your dad in the prison and they bring him back to the house. And and he walks in the door and you're reunited with your father. Can you talk about what that was like when your dad finally makes it home?
It was one of the greatest, one of the best moments I've ever lived. Even coming to the United States, I didn't have that feeling. I felt like, when I saw him, I just laid on his lap and I started crying. It's like, I've been through so much at a time where I really needed him, and he wasn't there. And I suddenly see him in front of me, even though he looked different. The torture was on his body. His face was different. But I couldn't say anything. I just kept crying. I laid on his lap.
Well, so you have this moment with your dad, and I know because I've talked to your dad so many times, I know that was very hard on him to see you upset. He kept on telling you, Naji, I'm okay, trying to reassure you. Eventually, your dad makes this decision that we can't stay here in Syria anymore. It's too dangerous. And you set off on first you go stay with some family in a different city, but eventually your dad decides and your mom that you need to leave Syria for good and cross into Jordan, where they think you'll be safer. Can you talk to me? Can you describe what it was like, that border crossing, when you were going from Syria into Jordan?
That was we had to go at 12 a.m. That's when it gets dark, so the military won't see us. We walked for around 3 hours after we went from the car in Syria until the border. Then we gathered at a place where there were so many people in one room. I think it was 100 or 200 people with the kids and crying. They took us outside, and there was a desert, just a whole desert. On the right, you could see the military bases that are watching, and on the front, there's a white light that they told us to keep walking till we get there. We actually knew on the same road we walked, a night before, 9 people were shot from the military after they saw them. And hearing the kids crying, it was very frightening. At any time, they told us if they start shooting, just lay on the ground.
So you make it into Jordan, and I believe you spend the first night in a refugee camp. What is it like for you that first night in Jordan?
It was one of the best nights, the safest night we ever had. Even though it was in a camp with too many people in a small space, we slept without waking up in the middle of the night, afraid from the bombs, from the tanks. We slept it was a great night's sleep.
A quiet night's sleep. It's not something that I would ever think would be the greatest thing in the world, but I guess for you guys, it really was.
Yeah, going through all that, I actually, stuff that we don't even notice, it's actually a privilege.
That's beautiful. So your family manages to find a small apartment in Jordan to live in, although it's not much. You said it's almost like a basement apartment, right?
Yes, yeah.
You said that sometimes it would even flood with sewage. It wasn't a great place, right?
No, every time it rains, we'd have flooding, and we'd have to throw away the carpet and some of the stuff that we put on the ground.
And you had hoped that you would be able to go to school in Jordan, but it didn't quite work out the way you hoped, did it?
No, I thought, we were gonna be just like before, but when we actually went to Jordan, the area we were at, people didn't like Syrian refugees. I got beaten every time I go outside. I would get beaten. The kids would gather around me and say, "Oh, you're from Syria, you're a refugee," and then they would start beating me for no reason. The same thing happened in school. Every day I would go to school. I would come home beaten. My face would be red, or I got hit. And my dad couldn't do anything. If we would go to the police or say anything to the school, they would deport us back to Syria.
Naji, I'm thinking about all these things that you're describing that you've been through, which are so hard. Were you depressed during this time, or what was your mindset?
I was actually thinking about when we go to the United States, what am I going to be, a doctor or?
Wait, so you're thinking you're having all these really horrible things happen, but you're like, in your mind, you have a bright future.
Yes, yeah. I don't know how, but even in the middle of the 5 years that I have been out of school, I was actually thinking of what I'm gonna be when I get old.
And that was a life that you envisioned in America.
Yes, yeah.
Where did your idea of America even come from?
It came from, the movies mostly. When you see like a room with a nice window to the outside. Also from people who went there before us, they said it's great. You live, you go to school, you work, and to me, it was like a dream that came true.
Wow. So you kind of held on to this idea of coming to America.
Yes, yeah.
But the situation becomes kind of complicated because you have a lot of your extended family ends up in Jordan. It's you, it's your uncle Isa, it's your grandmother, it's your other aunts and uncles. You all apply to come to America, but initially they don't all get the green light. Your family does, and your grandmother, but some of your aunt and uncles don't. And so you're set in a situation where do you go and leave some family members behind, or do you wait? And you had some strong opinions about that you voiced to your father. Can you explain what your thinking was?
Yeah, it was a really tough situation because, to me, it looked like that's the only way I can have a future, and then we all can have a future because in Jordan we weren't able to work, we weren't able to go to school. So I was very surprised when my dad actually was saying, "Oh, we should wait for the rest of the family," because we went through all the war, we always stayed together, and like now we had to split. So on my side, I would every day talk to my dad, say, we have to go. I want to go to school. I want to learn. We want to work. And at the same time, he would actually think about his family, his mom, his brothers that he never left.
Yeah, your dad, and I've talked to your dad a lot about this. He was in a very difficult situation because on the one hand, he really wanted you and your sisters to have this better life in America. And on the other hand, he felt very guilty because your grandmother was saying, I'm not going until everyone can go. And so he has to leave his mother potentially and his other brother and sister behind. And to add to the drama of this moment is the fact that your family is watching the 2016 election unfold in America. And it's clear that if Donald Trump becomes president, that the policy towards refugees is likely to change. And so there's the sense that maybe the door might be shutting. So at the last minute, your dad makes a decision. And can you tell us what happens?
He actually we saw Trump's videos. We looked at what he said about Muslims, about bringing in refugees, and it was scary. We really were afraid that he won because we didn't know about the checks and balances and how the power is spread. So my dad also had this idea of he is going to a place he doesn't speak the language, he doesn't know anyone there, and pretty much we don't know anything about it, and we only see the president of this country saying all those bad things about us. So it was very scary.
And just to be clear here, when you land in America on election day, it's not clear who's won. But the next morning, you wake up and it's clear that it's now President Donald Trump, and the situation has changed. And in fact, your father gets a message from his mother, from your grandmother, who sends the message from Jordan. Your grandmother has seen the news. And can you tell us what that message to your father says?
My grandmother told my dad that, Ibrahim, I might not see you again. I hope you have a good life. After Trump won the election, we might not be able to see each other again. And when I heard this, I felt kind of guilty, and I felt sad for my dad because even though he didn't say anything to me, I was the one who's pushing to leave the family.
Well, it's a lot, Naji. It's a lot for a then 14-year-old to have on their shoulders. And that's about the time that I met you and started following your story here in America. And I went to school with you and saw your classes and met your principals and started going to your family events. And probably the most difficult moment that I saw you go through was a moment that occurred about 3 or 4 months after you had landed in the United States. And just to give a little context at that time, you were doing well. You and your sisters and brother had started school. Your dad was in a job training program. Your mom was making your art. Like, it was difficult, but you were settling into life in America pretty well. And then something happens. And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, on a day, a normal day, we get my dad get a voicemail, and I felt like the atmosphere was different. Everyone was in their rooms. I went outside and I talked to my mom and dad. They were kind of talking in a quiet voice. I said, "What's going on?" They didn't want to tell me in the beginning, but I kept asking them till they told me that someone is threatening us, and I heard the voicemail. It says, all the bad words, "You're Muslim." And he said my dad's name. He said where we live. He said, "You have 24 hours until you leave the United States, or we're going to come to your house and kill you."
Wow. And what was it's a death threat. They received a death threat. And what is your feeling when you hear this message?
Very scared. The first thing I told my dad is, what's the laws here to get a gun to protect ourselves?
And your dad says, "No way," right?
Yeah, he said no.
He says no. And I have to say, Naji, you're a pretty peaceful guy. It's hard for me to picture you with a gun. But your dad says no. In fact, your dad, even in this moment, is saying your dad has faith. He's saying the police and the FBI, they're going to handle this because the FBI gets involved. But it's quite a hard moment for you guys. And you eventually, for you also, up until this time, when you've been through all these hard things in Syria, and you come to Jordan and you can't go to school and you're getting bullied, and all this time you have this idea that if I can just make it to America, it's going to be okay. And then you get here and this happens. And I'm wondering, does that change the way you look at America or change the way you look at life? Like, how do you process that?
At that time, it was very disappointing. I felt very down. All my dreams like broken in front of me. I felt like, we'll never be in a safe place. And actually, my sister Amma comes up to me and because I was the one who was pushing to go to the US, she said, "Is this the America you were talking about?"
And what'd you say?
I didn't have any words to tell her.
So you have this moment, it's kind of the low point, but you end up moving out. You live in a hotel for a while. I remember visiting you in the hotel. I think that's where you discovered the gym.
Yes, yeah.
You lived in it was like a small hotel off the highway. You lived there for like a month and a half or something. What was it like living in a motel for a month and a half?
It was kind of nice. I've never been in a hotel, or I've never been in a gym too before.
Yeah, it was like all the waffles you could eat.
Yeah, the breakfast was great.
Can you still eat waffles, or do you like look at waffles and think like, "Oh, no more, never again"?
Yeah, we ate a lot for like a month or two.
So you're at the hotel. Eventually, you meet a woman named Nancy Latif who helps you find a new house in West Hartford. And you would think that would be, and it's worked out well in West Hartford, but just to give you a quick sense, there's more things that happen that are difficult for this family. They get COVID. Naji's taking care of it. I'm laughing because it's so crazy. If I made this up, people would say you wouldn't believe it. There's also, one day there was an electrical fire at your house, and the house basically catches fire.
Yeah.
Naji, talk to us about what happens. I mean, it's like there's no end to the things your family's been through, but what happened in that fire?
On that day, I set the alarm for 7 in the morning to go to the gym. And then I woke up on the alarm. I was so tired, I went back to sleep. And I wish I never did, because I was asleep and I suddenly hear my mom, my sister, they're all yelling. They're screaming. And I felt like it was weird. On that dream, I was asleep. I wanted it to move, but I couldn't. I don't know how. But then I suddenly find myself right next to my dad trying to stop the fire. all the way when I walk out to my room, I couldn't remember anything. My sister told me I was running around checking on them because back home in Syria, that was the thing that we were looking for. Like suddenly, whenever a bomb happened, and the smell, that was like, we got hit, the house got hit, and that was like a nightmare. So I think at that moment, I developed PTSD when I checked with the doctor. Um, the smell of the burn, the screams, it all brought back the memories.
I want to say that, and despite the fact that you're in a fire, that it's bringing back the memories of Syria, what happens next is kind of amazing and kind of speaks deeply to the person that Naji is. The family, he goes outside with his brothers and sisters, and he looks down the driveway and sees that the car that belongs to his upstairs neighbor is in the driveway. And that leads him to realize that and he doesn't see her anywhere. So he knows she's still in that upstairs unit while this fire is going on. And so Naji, can you tell us what you do?
Yeah, as soon as I saw her car, I knew that she was upstairs. So I went inside the house again. My mom was calling me outside to come outside. I kept running. I went upstairs. There was so much smoke that I put my shirt on my mouth, and it didn't even help. So I knocked the door a couple of times. I go downstairs again outside to get some breath, and then she didn't open the door. I said, next time, if she doesn't open again, I'm gonna have to break the door. And I go run back in and I knock the door. Hopefully, thankfully, she opens up the door, and we took her down outside.
I actually talked to Naji's neighbor a few days later, and she says that she thinks that there's a decent chance that Naji saved her life. Naji, I want to open this up to questions now. I have more to say, but I want to encourage the students who are hosting us today to feel free to ask any questions that they have. And so I'm just seeing the first one come in, and it says, Naji, in your book, you had turtles. Do you remember the turtles' names? That's one question. And then they also ask, well, I'll do that. Did the turtles have names, and do you remember them?
No, they actually didn't. But, we had like three turtles. We also had pigeons.
Yes, the pigeon. And you had pigeons because how did you have pigeons? Did one fall in your yard, you said?
Yeah, one fell on my yard. I made a little house, and then I bought more.
There's more questions in this same question. They said, will Naji's family in Jordan be able to come to America someday?
That's why I was very excited on Biden's win the election. Hopefully that means, they will be able to come.
Right. And was your family in Jordan following how the election went?
They were actually giving us news. They were texting us saying, oh, Biden won.
Because for your family, and just to be clear here, because I know in America, politics can be very divisive, but I just want everyone to understand that for Naji's family, this is very personal. This isn't political. This is there a chance I'm going to see my grandma again?
Yeah, that what means to me.
Another question was wondering if Naji still keeps in touch with his friends from Syria. That's a good one. Do you, Naji?
Yeah, some of them. I know a friend who's in Canada right now.
Wow. This is a friend from Homs.
Yes. Yeah.
Homs is the town in Syria. And where in Canada does this friend live?
He's in London, Toronto.
In Toronto?
Yeah.
Or London?
Yeah.
You said London, Ontario?
London, Ontario. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that'd be great. Hopefully you can maybe reunite with him one day.
Yeah, I'm planning to do.
That'd be great. Feel free. More folks should send in their questions here for Naji. Naji, I'm going to ask, while people are typing away, hopefully, I'm going to ask you a question. And I always ask you the same question whenever we talk. And I always, but I never tire of exploring this idea. You all can probably get a sense from even just this brief time with Naji on Zoom that he is a happy person. He loves to laugh. You're like the most optimistic person I've ever met, I think. And I just want to know, how do you do it? Like, what advice can you give us? You've been through so many hard things, and yet you find a way to smile and laugh and see the glass half full. What advice can you get? How do you do it? And what can you tell us?
You know, uh, everyone has situation, everyone goes through issues. It's only about focusing, looking at the good things that are actually in your life. Even though all that happening, I was looking at, very happy that my dad is there. He didn't hurt, that my family, that we were all safe. That actually made us feel like, we're pretty lucky. We looked at different people who lost their family in the war, and it made us feel good.
Wow. It's amazing that you can do that, thinking all the things that are bad things that happen, you can still see what you're lucky to have. That's super powerful. Do you know if anyone, any of your old friends from Syria made it here to the United States? I know you mentioned that there was someone from in Canada, but one of the questions is, did any of them make it to the United States?
No, not actually, not that I know of.
Wow.
Yeah, some of them, I lost contact with. Some of them later, I heard that they didn't make it outside of Syria.
Wow. This is one I know the answer to, but I'm gonna let you explain. One of the students asks, Naji, do you know if your old home and your old neighborhood is still standing?
It's actually all stone. It was burnt and then it was bombed.
Yeah. And
The
you
floor
know
is still there.
Can you explain how you know this, Naji?
A neighbor of us, he came back to check on his house. He also lives next to us, so he took a video of our house, and it was just broken stone on top of each other.
Another question. There's one for me, but I'm gonna just looking through these. There's one for me about the graphic narrative. I'll get to that. Naji, here's a question. What are your hopes for the future? I know you originally said a doctor or engineer. What are your dreams now for the future?
Now I hope I make it into college, and hopefully it be, even with my English, it would be easy for me to become in the medical field.
Another question for you, Naji. The question is, Naji, what is your favorite thing about America?
My favorite thing is that people are very nice. Sometimes you can find some people that are not, but I go to school, I feel like I'm one of them. I go outside, I don't feel, I don't have that feeling that I had in Jordan, where like you feel different. I go to school, it makes me feel like I'm one of you guys, and it's great.
That's so nice, Naji. Nice to hear. And I'll add that when Naji's family just bought a house, and there's two things you have to know about this house, because I was there right after they moved in. The first thing your dad did was put up an American flag, which I thought was really beautiful. And then the first thing that you did, tell us what you did in the backyard.
I bought a couple pigeons.
Yeah. He's got a beautiful pigeon house, but these really amazing. It's like you did all these years later, you have your pigeons.
Yeah, we actually feel at home and feel safe now.
Oh, that's great. It's beautiful. Naji, another question for you was, have you met other refugees in this country, either from Syria or elsewhere, who have similar stories to you?
Yes, I've met people. Stories are different. Some people just had a hard time leaving. Some people left in the airplane.
Right. There's a question from me, which I guess I'll answer, which is, to me, Jake, how did it feel to give your writing over to an illustrator? Were you worried that the graphic narrative wouldn't turn out how you imagined? I think that both me and Naji can both answer this question, actually. I had never done one before, so I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And I'll tell you one little story that was really powerful. The last episode of the New York Times series was the story of Naji and his family learning that their house had been destroyed. And actually, his mother, it was both a beautiful and sad story. His mother had a key to the house. His mom's name is Adiba, and Adiba carried this key with her everywhere. And the key was like something that was like, it almost had like a magical promise that someday she would go back to her home. She would look at the key and think like, it still opens that door, I'm going to go home. And so when she found out that the house was gone, she looked at the key, and the very last image of the New York Times series was of Adiba's hand closing on the key. And you kind of didn't know whether it was closing because she was letting go, like the key was disappearing because the home was gone, or because she was holding the key that tight to her. So anyway, I had my son, my older boy at the time was about 11. And I remember that the New York Times was out on the kitchen table, and I saw him reading the newspaper. And I kind of didn't want to hover because I don't want him to feel that like dad is watching his every reaction. And when he was done, he turned around to me and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "Daddy, they had a home just like us, didn't they?" And I was so moved by that. And I think that the drawings, the imagery of the house and of the key, it really made even an 11-year-old kid understand some of the power of what Naji's family had been through. But then the other thing I'll just say about this is that when the book was done, I hadn't shown really the book to Naji's family at all. They had seen the New York Times series, but the book was entirely different. And I was worried about how they would like it or not like it. And so I got like 10 copies of the book. I went to visit Naji's family, and you can't visit Naji's family without his mother making a delicious meal. So we had the meal, and then we took out the book, and everyone in the family starts looking at the pages, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hope they like it. And Naji, you went right to some of the sick pictures of Syria, of what it looked like, and you can just what was it like for you to see those images?
I really wanted to see those images first because I saw it, but the person who's drawing them, he didn't see them. When I looked, I was shocked that it was very similar.
Yeah, and we were nervous about that because we didn't want it to seem like this was, we didn't know that it would be. I remember you saying like, "Oh wow, it looked like this," and that was very nice from me.
Yeah.
Another question's coming in here. Are there ways that writing this book and researching it changed your outlook on America and our policies, Jake? That's a question to me. I think it did. I think that, look, I was someone who was probably already open to the idea of refugees coming to the country. I come from a family that has Holocaust survivors in it. So I remember growing up with the story of the St. Louis, which is the famous boat that got turned around. We wouldn't let them in, and they end up getting sent back to Nazi Germany. That was a story that I had grown up with. But I didn't witness it really firsthand. And I guess this is the point that I was making to you all earlier, was that when Naji is saying that they're watching the election and they're feeling relief that Biden is elected, that it's not political, that it's personal for them, that behind all the policies and whether I like refugees, don't like, there's a family. There's Naji's family with a mom and a dad and a grandma, not that different from you and me. And I think that for me, this story and this whole process was just a reminder of that small personal story that is impacted by these bigger policies. And that reminder is really important because that's our common humanity there. So yeah, I think it did. Another question comes in. Would Naji's family ever visit Syria again when the war ends, or would it be too painful to go back? That's a really great question. What do you think about that, Naji?
We actually talk about it, me and my family. My dad says it's too dangerous. My mom says what if they take us again? You can never know what they would do. To me, I really just want to go there, see what I've seen when I was younger, because some of the images fades away. I still love, I still love where I was born. I would love to go see my school.
Next question comes in, and this one's to me. It says, what was your main goal and reason for writing this book? It's a little bit about what I just told you before, which is that I remember the stories from my own family's past about people that were trying to escape the war, World War II in Europe. And some of them got out and some of them didn't. And so the thing that I felt about Naji's family was I felt a connection, and we've talked about this many times, that we're so different in so many different ways, religion and language and culture. But I also feel like Naji could be part of my family because he's got that, him and his mom and dad have that same story of trying to come to America to find a better life. And so that was it in large part.
So we have a time for a couple more questions.
Okay, that sounds good. We're almost at our time. If there's one or two remaining questions. Naji, I'll ask you a question. What is your view on going to school? Because I find this interesting. My kids are often saying, you know, Dad, we have to go to school tomorrow. And, you know, kind of rolling their eyes. But that's different than the way you look at it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's way more important than when we look at it as, you know, kids. And I was 10 years old. I was out of school for 5 years. You know, I didn't have to do homework. I didn't have to study. It's really very hard. It's not easy. It's not good. I think school is really a privilege that we should really be thankful for. And we won't know the effect of it until we get older.
Mm. Someone asked you before, what was your favorite part about living in America? Someone has the kind of opposite take on that question. What's your least favorite thing about the US?
I think the least favorite thing is that like some families out there have when a teenager grows to 18, they go outside, live on their own. I feel like, you know, there should be more family connection, but you know, that's the only thing.
There you see Naji's optimism. He's loath to say a bad thing about anyone or any place, but it is true. I was saying to Naji the other day, are you excited about going away to college and living in the dorms? And you're like, I don't know if I am going to live in the dorms. I might stay at home. And that no American kid ever says that. Like my 14-year-old is already talking about like, oh yeah, he's going to live in the dorms. You're very devoted. You're very devoted to your family. It's true.
Yes, especially the war or what we've gone through really strengthened our relationship. Because you know, we see things that we couldn't have seen before.
Yeah. Well, I strongly encourage you guys to look at the book. The book is told largely through Naji's eyes. It's his story. There's some hard parts in the book, but also that same good sense of humor and positivity shines through, I think. And there's a lot more stories. We're not going to tell them all because we want you to read them as well. I want to say one last thing that I want you to, and it gets back to what Beth Coyne was saying about empathy and the importance of empathy. Someone once said to me, and I think this is so powerful and beautiful, they said, empathy is ultimately an act of imagination. And I've thought about, what does that mean? And I think that what that means is, in order to feel someone, to feel their pain, to feel their hope, you have to be able to try to imagine what life looks like through their eyes. And that was my task that I tried so much to do in this book. And I do believe that if we could go through that process of trying to imagine, that there would be a lot less mistrust and hatred, not just in this country, but everywhere. And, you know, refugees are often a target. People say, oh, refugees, we don't want refugees. But the next time that someone says that, I want you to pause for a second. And I want you to remember the story of this young man who's with us today and everything he went through in Syria and the bombs and the fire and all that. And when he got to this country and his house caught on fire It was this same young man that ran up the stairs into the smoke and into the flames and pounded on that door so that woman would know there was a fire and she could get out of the house. That is also a refugee. And people say to me sometimes, they say, Jake, it must be depressing writing about refugees. No, no, no. To the contrary. Every time I talk to this young man, I think to myself, whatever you're complaining about, Jake, whatever you're griping about, you should shut up and try to see how lucky you are, because Naji's had a far harder road than me, and he still somehow manages to see how lucky he is. And so to me, someone asked, why did I write the book? Every time I visited the Audubon family, I was reminded of that. And that was a gift that sustained me. And I hope that the spirit of that and that whole feeling is in that book. And I know from my visits to the country school, these are all sorts of lessons that you all will appreciate. So with that, we thank you so much. Thank you for the support for RJ Julia, from the school, from Naji, from being with us. And as we say, as Naji has taught me, there's an expression in Arabic. It says, Inshallah, if we are so lucky, Inshallah, Naji, that your grandmother will soon make it here and you'll be reunited with her.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your time.
This was, I have to say, one of the most amazing events. This book is amazing, Naji. Oh my goodness. How poised and beautiful you are to share your story, and Jake for telling it. And it was so informative and it was so amazing. And I cannot thank you both enough for coming tonight, and for the country school, Beth and Liz, you guys, and the students who introduced. It was a special evening, and I thank you so, so much for letting RJ Julia be a part of it. So thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful evening.